there, you deserve a vacation and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So, with that, let me begin. Welcome to How to Lead in an Innovative Organization, Unleash People's Creativity. Again, I'm Jerry Kahn, and it's my pleasure to share this with you. Rather than jump into the traditional presentation that I would do, I thought rather I would have a little fun with you and make you use your creativity, because innovation is about unleashing creativity and then harnessing it by the organization and then building a culture and a strategy for utilizing it and leadership to keep it moving forward. But it's all about people. So let's start that then. So here's the question. Imagine there's a bunch of sticks that I have, and I put them down to create this equation in front of me. And imagine you were given the effort of you could move the sticks any way you want to. What's the least effort you would need to turn this incorrect equation into a correct one? Take a look at it. There's several different possibilities. So what some people might say is you'll take the 1 after the x on the left-hand side, move it to the right-hand side, and 10 plus 1 equals 11. Other people would take one of the sticks away from the plus to make it a minus. 11 minus 1 equals 10. Lots of possibilities. The ultimate simplest one, though, is not even moving any sticks at all. Just look at this thing upside down, and 10 equals 1 plus 9. And so if you step essentially out of the box, one could see it differently. And actually, many people ask, where does that expression come from? And I'm now about to show you. So imagine you have these 9 dots, and you think of it as being in a box. And you want to connect all the dots with 4 lines without ever lifting your pencil from the paper. How would you do it? Take a minute and try that. Draw the dots on a sheet of paper next to you, and you can be able to figure out how to do this. So for those of you who had trouble solving it, it isn't that easy. Again, that's where the out-of-the-box concept comes from. And as you can see, the key is to move outside of the area of those 9 in order to be able to do it. It's the only solution that would work to be able to do it that way. Actually, there is another solution if you think of these not as dots, which is really what I do want you to think about them, but big spheres, and you could be able to actually have 2 lines going through the same one, and there's a way to do that if you think of this as an alphabet. But we won't go into that because that's not what the problem is. I've seen that done, and that's my whole point. Creativity is stretching the way we look at things. I'll give you one last one to play with. I want you to picture for a minute a black cat with a big stick. Some of you are going to come up with a house cat. Some of you, as somebody would say, a house cat with a knitting needle. Some of you might be thinking of a more wild cat that might be out in the wild, like a jaguar, who's playing with maybe a branch of a tree or something to that effect. There are different kinds of approaches for what the black cat is, big, small, where they're located, etc. What's interesting about it is another way to look at it, and that's to use the word cat differently. Louis Armstrong, great jazz player, focused on exciting people for years, was often referred to as a cat. It's vernacular for great jazz musicians, and so his stick was his trumpet. So the key in creativity is looking outside of your normal use of words, concepts, ideas, places, things like that, and being able, therefore, to come up with something new. And that's how you get innovation, by unleashing people's creativity. So we'll start off with understanding a little more clearly what is creativity, innovation, and how leadership plays its role. Then we're going to spend some time on stimulating creativity. How do you do that in the organization you were in? And finally, what does it take to build an innovative organization? So, as many of you know, I'm a teacher, teaching here both at the City University of New York and University of Shanghai from time to time. And what I like to do is define terms. Creativity, in many ways, is breaking down prior assumptions, because they lock in the way we look at things. And if we break them down, we open up our ideas, our way to seeing new ideas through new connections. Now, once you've got a creative new idea, so why does my server have to sit on my desktop? or in a machine that's sitting under my desk, or in a room and even on my floor. Why not think about it being somewhere totally different that I can access anywhere I want to, which became the concept of the cloud. Innovation is taking those new ideas and turning them into corporate marketplace reality. In other words, it's asking the commercial question, how do I take this and turn it into something that we can all make money on and use? So that's what innovation really is about, and that's where the real link comes from. Now, sometimes I'm asked, well, what's the word invention, and how does that fit into the equation? And the answer is relatively simple. It's the commercial product that takes advantage of the innovation. So what you're thinking about is, how could I cool air to be able to get cool air out? And when I figure out that whole process using Freon or something like that, that leads me to create something new called an air conditioner. Okay? The invention is the air conditioner. The value of creativity and innovation is something we all know about in many different ways. IBM does studies every 2 years with 1,500 senior executives, mostly CEOs, around the world. And every 2 years, when it does the survey, with one exception that I'm aware of in the last 20 years, the number one thing as a priority for these CEOs is innovation. And so dealing with it is something that every major company and smaller companies should be focused on. And here's an example of 3 or 4 different companies who have done that. They've made the decision to do it, and you can see what the benefits are. Frito-Lay saving $100 million in cost reductions. Tufts Healthcare, which is the second largest HMO in New England, expanding its capability through innovations, boy, that actually won awards, to launch new products and serve more people. 3M, which says every year 30% of its sales comes from new products. We're all used to one of them. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. And Cisco, and I'm not talking about the hardware company, I'm talking about the food distributor, a $23 billion company. They're reporting creativity training and how it works for them and increased the average productivity by 25 to 30%. So many different ways of looking at it, but it can make a significant difference. The key is for us to understand that creativity is anybody's province and innovation can occur there for anywhere. It can be about a product like Post-it notes. It can be about a process, okay? Think of the assembly line. It can be the way e-commerce is working, new pay systems making it all possible, shipping changes, organizational structures, okay? We've moved from the functional model to the small business model to the matrix model in the 1960s, and now we have a model that's out there that we need to look at called the network model, one in which we watch companies like, not organizations, like Al-Qaeda and ISIS working with, where people don't meet face-to-face ever, and they're able to do what they need to do. Organizational functions change, financial tools change, management tools change, strategy tools change, ultimately management changes. So innovations at so many different levels can do different things. The key is to understand the general rubric, and that is there are 3 things. It's making things better, faster, cheaper, so to speak. Efficiency is the faster. It's producing more of the things at the same time. So if I want to serve more people in a bank, giving them access to deposit money and taking out money, and I create an ATM, I've created an innovative product, in this case the invention of the ATM, which allowed me to serve thousands and thousands, millions and millions, I should say, of bankers a day. I'm sorry, millions and millions of customers a day at a bank without ever having to actually have a teller there, saving us time and money. I might also produce superior products and services. So if you're concerned about the environment, obviously the hybrid car, the electric car, all of these things become safer for the environment. What's important to understand is some of these things are not so much immediately either efficient or superior, but what they're doing actually is changing an industry. They're transforming something that was complex, that was expensive, into something that's going to be simple. So the concept of a computer that could travel, which became known as a laptop, and eventually a notebook, becomes even easier to use, called a tablet. Or mobile phones become mobile devices instead of landline phones. And today we have phablets, which combine the two. And we're working into the Internet of Things, which will change the way our houses and everything else works out, all of which disrupt current business models. And that's really the job of innovation, being able to do that and making the difference there. Leaders champion innovation. So that's the reason we tie in creativity and innovation things at the province of everybody, to the leaders who make it possible to happen. Here's just two of the many quotes I could give you showing how it's worked for them, not just as a time thing in terms of today, but a long-term profit and how they do it. The key thing to understand about innovation is that if you do it correctly on the large scale, it'll set new industry standards. Think about Apple and all the stuff it's done. It creates completely new experiences and it can transform one or more industries, in Apple's case, five. So it's an opportunity to do it. Now, the leaders who help people channel all of that creativity to create innovations play four different roles, Sheila Bethel tells us, and I think it's a great way to look at it. Some enlighten us to a new possibility, the cause, okay? Martin Luther King it dealt with civil rights, Mahatma Gandhi with freedom in India. If you think of Apple and Steve Jobs, his cause was the function of the great design, which would be a function as well as a purpose, and how it would change the equation. And he did that to enlighten us in many ways. There are some creators who are just looking for answers and trying to find them all the time. Thomas Edison is a great example of that. So I call him the creative genius. You have builders like Jack Welch or Andy Grove who took a look at a technology or a concept and said, how can I build a long-term company and build innovation into it? And that's what each of them did at GE and then at Intel. And then you have people who come into their businesses, and their role is to take that creativity and channel it to greater products and services to be able to meet more of the followers' needs. And that would be Jeff Immelt over at Intel as an example of someone who did it. The point that we need to understand is it's a great model, people being creative, unleashing their creativity, leaders recognizing it, encouraging it, channeling it, moving it through the organization, producing innovative products. The unfortunate part is most companies, as we know, are risk averse. They really don't want to push it. This was a very interesting study done last year by Accenture. And take a look at the data. It looked at 500 large companies, and it found that employees are eager to be entrepreneurial. 52% actually started pursuing an entrepreneurial idea. But only 20% said management actually supports it. So there's a difference in action and words. And 77% said their ideas were rewarded, which is great, but only 23% said they were rewarded if the output is not yet proven. And the understanding is great ideas don't automatically happen. You have to have certain times where it takes longer to do and failure. In fact, I was recently reading the new book on Google, and the story was done on AdWords, and it's now a $10 billion product line. And the person who was building a system of putting ads next to email was working on it for almost 2 years. And finally, he reached the point where his boss had said, maybe it's time to move on. We're really not able to figure this thing out. I think you should give it up. That night, he tells the story, he went home, had an idea of how it might work, worked through the night on it. The next morning, his boss comes in, and she finds on her desk not only Gmail, but ads next to it. And that leads to a $10 billion industry. So we need to understand that it might be failures we have to reinforce. 2 years is a long time paying for something that wasn't working, but that's how you're going to get things to move forward. So how do we do it? How, as corporate leaders, do we inspire people to stimulate their creativity and become innovative? One of the people who focuses on doing this all the time is to be a leader like Jeff Bezos, who, he says, I encourage our employees to go down blind alleys. He recognizes not everything's going to work, and it doesn't matter if it's blind alley, they're going to get rewarded for doing it. Companies that give people time to work on ideas are focusing on the activity that will lead to the results, recognizing that's the most important thing. Think about very powerful VC firms. The VC formula is you're going to have 10 companies investment. One company is going to be a super success, Facebook. One company is going to be basically a break-even to small success, and the other 8 will probably fail. But if you don't inspire everyone to work for everything, you're never going to get to that 10th because you have to get through the other 9 to get there. So how do you do it? Understand again, one, that the concept of creativity isn't a genius sitting alone and doing it all by himself, but it's actually everybody working together and thinking it out. Not just Edison or Ford, we are all creative. Post-it notes did not come from someone like an Edison or a Ford. It came from a group of people working in 3M who came up with an idea and pursued it. So we need to understand everyone has that idea. Our job as a leader is to unleash their potential. And how do we do it? We structure an environment that's sympathetic, it encourages creativity, it protects someone who comes up with an idea rather than shooting them down right away, and then channels it into a way that becomes goal oriented to spur innovation. How do we channel it? How do we harness that creativity? By understanding its underlying dynamics. Whether our goal ultimately is changing people, processes, or products, we need to deal with the individual's motivation. Are they curious about something? Are they trying to figure out how else can I do this? Think about the Walkman, the Sony Walkman, with somebody who said, what I really want to do is have a tape recorder, but it's just too bulky and I'm not looking to record anything. And that led to the Sony Walkman. Today's iPods are a lot smaller, carry a lot more music. Okay, it's the motivation to constantly do something better. How is it done? It's by making and breaking connections. It's seeing it differently. It's coming up with a concept that nobody did. So think about 3M's Post-it notes. Connection was, well, if this doesn't glue well, therefore we should throw it away. The thing was, well, if it doesn't glue well, but it does a temporary glue, how might that have a real use in people's lives? And that's what led to it. And finally, we have to always be willing to take a look at everything and evaluate it. What works, what doesn't work, and try to make it work for us if we're going to do it. There's a great expression, creativity favors the prepared mind. I love that phrase because what it really says is use an open mind that's going to make the difference. So Fulton, he looks around at a steam engine, he looks at a sailing ship and says, wouldn't it be great if we could figure out a way to put it together? And that's how he creates a steamship. Ford's assembly line is really a combination of him looking at the Singer sewing machines, interchangeable parts, and the disassembly, from what he saw before being the disassembly rather of Chicago meat packers who were taking calves and cows and cutting them up and dividing it up so it starts as an animal and at the other end you end up with a skeleton and all kinds of different types of meat. He said, what if you put it all together? He reverse engineered it. Some of this is purposeful. First two examples of that. Some are not. By the way, one purposeful one is the Reebok pump. Brought $1 billion product line by doing that. But the other part of it that's important to understand is that some of it's accidental. So, for example, mold generated penicillin. Okay, failed glue was the foundation of Post-it notes, and a failed clinical trial for hair loss led to Viagra. So again, it's the prepared mind to say, I'm going to look for something that could come out of this, otherwise I will miss it. So failures lead to success in the same way if we're looking for new ideas. And that's why it's our job as leaders to provide that kind of climate, that kind of culture in a company. So how do we nurture it? By encouraging our people to ask questions, to stop what's going on and say, why do you think it's happening that way? I used to have a boss who, I was telling the story yesterday at a training program I did for a public company, that she was my very first boss, and every time the board would reach a decision, we were all happy, we were ready to get up, and she would suddenly bend backwards, take her hands, stroke through her hair. She had this short pepper hair, and she'd go, I'm so confused, which was our signal to say, stop. Take a look at everything that we've just gone through. Are we really right with all our assumptions, or some of them wrong? And in 80% of the cases, I believe, we came up with better answers based on having tweaked what we did or rethought what we did than if we'd have left it alone and walked out. A lot of it is finding creative habits. I have an artist friend, and many years ago when he first kind of embarked on his art world, he took a relatively large closet, small room, and he converted it into a special room for himself. It was a dark room with just lights and many scents, and he could close it and do some thinking, and when he came out of that, he was ready to do his painting. Find your passion. You're obviously going to channel more energy where you're excited and interested in doing things than if you're not. You want to awaken your humor because humor makes you look at things differently. That's the great part of it. You want to read, listen, hear lots of different information. I work with lots of CEOs, and they're always commenting to me when I say, oh, like today, this morning in my coaching session, I brought in a book of something I had read for this person. And he says, how do you do all of this? And I said, it's how I stimulate my creativity, by listening and reading other people's ideas and trying to think what are the connections. And by switching topics, I'm able to do that. And again, I gave you the idea of space in terms of it to be a vacation. Microsoft, Bill Gates used to do that, take 2 weeks off a year to be creative. Oh, my friend Oscar, who found the room. It's about asking questions and thinking it out differently. That's really the key. So you have on the left a whole bunch of questions. Why did something happen? And really pushing it to really understand it. What, when, where, how, who. All these kind of questions can be asked about anything. And when you're asking it, it changes what you're doing. Imagine, first computing in this country was bought from companies. And when the first PC was invented, there were many companies who looked at it and said, why would you want something on a desktop? It makes no sense at all. People are only going to want these big computers, and there's only a limited market for that, people used to think. Look how they were wrong and changed it. Or another way to look at it is to take a look at what you've already got and say, how could I change it in some way? So rethink it out, put it in a different priority, in a different order, reconfigure, relocate. You can reduce. There are people who, my uncle, when I was a kid, once told me a story about him taking watches apart so he would learn more about it and putting them back together and giving them back to people, and every once in a while finding he left that apart. But it worked. So was it really essential or not? To this day, I've always been curious. Part of stimulating your mind is by using metaphors. So here was a company in 2000, brand new IT company in an industry that was very big, very solid, with one great leader. And they wanted to differentiate it, but get people's attention. And you can write all the words you want, but people like pictures rather than words. And so they realized what really made them different was security, because that was the industry they were working with. So they said, if you can huff and puff and blow someone else's business down, or think about it, I have a software solution I can hack into it, or I have one that I can't get into because it's solid, like the one on the right, that will make all the difference in the world. They introduced this in PC World, PC Magazine, all the different media at the time, and within 1 year went from a startup to the number one company in the industry. Sometimes you have to invent them. I take a lot of people to software, to shows, especially software shows, and the most fascinating thing when you meet people is how they tell you about their integrated solution. And I used to think about, what does integrated mean? My people would ask me to think about it with them. And integrated means taking parts and put it together. Well, just to make the point, think of a presentation ultimately coming out of this. But Shelley, she wrote Frankenstein, dealt with the first integrated human being. Not quite human, but you get the point. Okay, finding all the different body parts and sewing them together so that they kind of work together was an integrated person. But that's not what God creates. God knows how to create it in a holistic sense, a unified sense. And so we need to really understand the difference between integration and unification. Our creativity tools, there are many. I'm not going into this here. This is what we do in our workshops with you, but these are many of the different ones. Brainstorming, to visualization, to storyboarding, etc. One that I will just mention in some detail is Scamper, which was done by Alex Osborne. And what those are initials of a concept that what you can do is do things to your product. You can substitute X for Y, magnify it, make it bigger, smaller, eliminate it, rearrange it. And the question always is, what can I do that's different? So if you take a look today at companies on fast food business like Panera, who introduced this about 6 months ago, and I was at the conference, I heard the first press release on this. They said people want to not stand so much in line. How do we change it? Well, what if they can order online, and then through an app we can relate when they're actually going to get to the store, pick it up, and then create a second counter in the store, redesigning the space they have, to be able to let people come and pick up what they want literally within a minute rather than having to order when they get to the store. What's the advantage? I use real estate better. Real estate's expensive. This is a way to solve that problem economically, but it also speeds people's services up. Win-win. So I'm transforming product and service. Do we know if training works? Well, here's a great study by Roger Firestein. He took small groups of people. He trained some. He didn't train others. They then dissected the words that they had in terms of their discussions about the products and services and how many ideas they came up with. And they found that people who trained to think more creatively generated twice as many ideas, about 50% more responses, And as you can see consistently across the board, they provided each other with more support rather than criticism. And there was plenty of laughter and smiles. In other words, 3 times as much ecstasy and happiness. In sum, how do you help people turn creativity into innovation? Well, the secret sauce here is by immersing yourself in the challenge. You've got to really take some time to play with it. It's not going to happen by just doing that, but you've got to be able to seed the creative bed so that it can kind of it can sprout the roots that you're looking for in a number of different places. So you explore an issue creatively, you select an approach you want to use, and then what you do is you say, if I got this, what could this do? This might be the solution that we can produce. And then from there, you want to develop and transform that idea into something that could become an innovation. And then as a leader, your job is to champion it. Because remember, the company you're working with right now is status quo driven. It wants to maintain what it's already got. You're the one who can change the equation, and that's your job. Now, once you've done that, you understand what you have to do. You have to recognize you're dealing with the culture of the company you have. And are you encouraging that culture to grow or not to grow? To take risk, to not take risk, to try new things out or not to. And so it's the culture that you build now that's going to make all the difference in the world. So the first thing you have to understand is if someone has a creative idea, you need to take it and create a business case for it. So I'm going to give you an invention as an example so that we can kind of walk it through. So Dean Kamen is one of the great inventors of our lifetime. Many of you know many of the products he's invented, one of which is Segway. He has a new one out, by the way, called Slingshot, which is producing relatively cost-effectively water, which is desperate for drinking and farming that's needed in third world countries, such as in Africa. And he's building that, and he's got a great partner with him to try to figure out how to make this work. He created something called the Segway. What was the concept? He said, well, imagine you fly into an airport, get off the plane, and what you want to do is you want to get to town. So to get to town is 20 miles away. How do you do that? We rent a car, we buy a car, we use a taxi, something like that. Once you're in town and you're trying to get around, you might want to do that effectively on your own. You might not want to use a car. So what you might want is something that can just get you from blocks to blocks relatively quickly, and he created the Segway, which did 6 miles per hour as a small engine. You stand on it, and the tires move. So he looked at it. He said, people want to get from one place to the other locally, don't want to use public transportation or private transportation in terms of cars or trains or something like that. Is there a competition? Really, the only competition now is either you rent a car or you walk or use a cab. So there was none in terms of a simple technology. What's the market? Anybody in a big town that wants to move from one town to the other? Could we build the technology to do it? He said yes. He figured it out. He worked on the business case, how much he could sell it for. He then actually produced the launch. And as part of his launch, I had the privilege many years ago of running for a very large company an innovation conference, and he was our guest speaker. And he came in, and he would go up the stairs, but literally picking up the Segway and went up from one stair to the other till he got to the podium, and then he would travel back and forth in front of everybody on stage. And so he really helped people understand how it could be used and where and what the market for it was. He built the business case because he said this is a way to get around a lot faster, a lot cheaper. People constantly doing the travel. It has not been a financial success because we're not always going to succeed. But Dean had so many great successes. It's okay. Then you want to develop an innovative culture. So you have to ask yourself, what are the qualities of the culture that I'm looking for that are going to be innovative? And these are 10 different variables. I want you to look at them as we talk about them. A challenge, risk-taking, time to work on your idea. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Support from other people, okay? Lively debates to keep people playing with it. Trust, absolute trust that you're using your time well to pursue it in some way. Only one's kind of negative, and that's conflicts, and it's just to minimize them. In other words, don't put people down. Encourage people to grow. That's the key to success as a culture. So the leader's job is to make this happen. And that's why, as you can see, next week we focus on leadership. It's a big issue. I run a Vistage group in New York. And I work with leaders of all sorts around the country, helping them produce and deliver winning presentations. And so it's really up to the leader to be able to take a role and make a difference, in this case for innovation, by identifying what they want and communicating that vision. And then basically setting up the value. Again, the value here is that failure is noble. It's okay. Not everything will work. Just give it your best shot. Giving people freedom to control their own work and ideas. That's really critical. And to identify the needed resources and help marshal them for the person who's working on it, the team that's working on their product. And then from there, provide air cover against any resistance. That's really what's critical. This is important because if they now feel comfortable and they can create it, they've done it, but you're going to reinforce that behavior by distributing rewards and recognition. So how might you build it? Well, here's some examples of internal systems that I know other companies have worked on. One is using time. We've talked about that. The Oak suggestion box has changed. Right now, it's just give people time to work on an idea. 3M pioneered that. They get the credits for that. 15% of time anybody could use to work on a great idea. Google has made it 20%. Intuit, I believe, is 20%. A number of other companies have gone that same way. So giving people 15, 20% of the time to take an idea that they have that they think is going to help the company and move them forward makes all the difference in the world. The second part is to recognize that you can do things in a different way. So Right Solutions is a great way of doing something differently. What it said up front is we're going to structure an environment to help you take ideas and use the collective wisdom of our members to make the difference. So Right Solutions is a software company. So what's interesting about them is you probably have a disproportionate amount of introverts in that company who work on their ideas on their own, and maybe they're geeks because they're software people. And so they're not going to be like someone, let's say at Google, who's an extrovert, comes up with a great idea and goes around touting it, which is what's going to happen in many companies. Oh, I got a great idea. You got to hear it. They're just going to work on it and put it out and see what happens. So they created a stock market of ideas. And whenever somebody comes to the company, they get $10,000 of stock that they can use to be able to buy the ability to work on projects. They come up with a project, they post it on the market, and then people in the company read this stuff, they can ask questions of it, and then they make a final decision whether or not they want to do this or not. What's really interesting about that then is there's a whole market of ideas, but only those that get a high value are the ones that are actually going to be taken to the next level of actually getting funded and done. What's interesting is their projects have been very interesting internal ones. Some have been external in terms of new products and services. One was actually a product that developed for a game company, Hasbro. Okay, made a lot of money for Hasbro, made a lot of money for them. It was just another application of what they're doing. What some companies do is they create what we call creativity and innovation circles. This is something we actually advocate greatly. It comes from the Ford idea of quality circle, but instead of bringing people from different departments to focus on quality, we believe you should be focusing on creativity and innovation and fostering it with people from different departments at different titles. Some companies, Facebook being an example, have hackathons. Give people a chance to kind of compete for an award and go for it and take everything we have and break it. Sometimes the way to do it isn't working internally. It's to go external. So, for example, as you all know, we've totally changed the concept of space travel in America in that now NASA has not the leading organization putting people up there. Instead, they're there to provide a platform and some support for private companies to do this. Peter Diamandis is one of the people who said, this is a great idea. Let's produce a prize to encourage teams to compete. And what they do now is they have a number, and that's led to a whole other set of ventures where people are doing the same thing, bringing in people, offering them an incentive to work. These people from outside the company are making the decisions that move people forward. Examples. Netflix took it, called it the Netflix Prize. It's a $1 million they gave to any team who could come in this period of time that was set up to come up with a way of changing the algorithm they use and improving it by 10% in terms of accuracy of picking the kind of movies people would like to watch. It's a great story because what actually happened is something like 30, 34 companies were involved, teams were involved. They were working little by little. They dropped out. About a week away from getting to the contest, two teams decided they were not going to make it on time. They decided to merge. They merged, and they finally won literally by like 15 minutes over another team who submitted right after it. Threadless is a T-shirt company that's online. It crowdsources ideas, so it's actually getting its product from creative ideas from other people, and people get a percentage of what they sold as a result of doing this. Flugov is a kind of different approach. It's a high-end shoe business. People get to offer their designs, and if the people at Flugov decide that it's a good one and they can do it, they'll then produce the shoe, and the shoe is named after the person. When I was reading this article about how it's working, it was very interesting that every one of the shoes that they're offering is coming from this only once that someone submitted to that one so far. Pfizer, Procter & Gamble, other companies like this, they do the same thing by partnering outside. The whole pharmaceutical industry, as you may know, has totally changed from the way it was, 50 years ago. 50 years ago, these big pharmaceutical companies had big R&D budgets to produce products. And the problem was it takes forever to do research. It's very expensive. Not everything works. The industry transformed itself into the fact that the big companies now commercialize winning formulas, and small companies in the biotech area go ahead and produce the actual stuff. When Lafer came back in at Procter & Gamble, his big contribution was using new ideas from outside, and the innovation level went from 10% to 50%. It's really very interesting. And finally, there are workshops you can do at different times. So we get asked through our group Commanding Strategies, where we help teach people how to dominate their competition by being more creative, more innovative, more strategic. And you can go to commandingstrategies.com to get an idea of what we do. We offer workshops where we sit down with people and we work on harnessing, first unleashing their creativity and then harnessing some of that for innovative products that they can have at the end of what they're doing. The hard part is once you've got the innovative ideas in place and you want to work on it, how do you make sure that it's going to get nurtured to become a final result? Why? Because remember, systems are resistant to change. And as a result of that resistance, we have this problem that there are people who are going to dissent. And what they're going to do is try to put you down and stop it. And so we need to understand that some people who are dissenting are doing it in a positive way. Some people are doing it in a negative way. So the positive dissenters are the ones we really want to recognize. And we want to say to them, something, you can generate innovation if you challenge the status quo. So we're looking at these people as challenging the status quo, offering new ideas, forcing people to change their assumptions about what they think is the way that's right. And by doing that, that's fine. What's amazing, if you think about it in our country, separate but equal was the constitutional standard in this country for hundreds of years. And then by challenging that status quo, by documenting that separate isn't equal, challenge that assumption. And that the Supreme Court in 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, came to the conclusion the assumption that separate is equal is wrong, and therefore it had to be changed, and that led to the end of the tremendous discrimination that took place. So our job, again, as a leader, is to encourage dissent, to manage them in a way that we can channel their energy, but not to suppress them, and that's really important. We also need to understand that, again, just as genius isn't anymore really the province of just one person, but a team with certain people more maybe genius than others, but the point is they work together as a team, we need to focus on how do we get the maximum energy out of a team. So team building is really critical. So the way to do that as a leader is you have issues come down, you get a group consensus about what's the problem, what's the complex issue we have to deal with, and how do we work on it, and then get the team to break up and focus on all the different components to make it work and keep coming back together till they eventually arrive at a new innovation. We want to reduce in those groups tangential debates, because if they take energy, they rob us from achieving our goals. We want to be able to reduce the amount of time we can so that people really focus in on what they do. And if you reinforce innovation, you find inevitably Meeting time becomes much more productive because people are excited to do what they want to do. When you're doing a group facilitation process, just a simple rule, not everyone speaks up equally. What you want to try to do is encourage equal participation at some level. At least everyone's participating within the group, because even people who are quiet have great ideas, and out of the mouth of babes can come great ideas. So what you want to do is focus in on getting everyone involved, and because everyone's involved, there's a level of trust that's evoked, and that will produce greater decision making. You want to also recognize that even if your team now has come together as an idea and the culture's there and everyone's excited, the rest of the organization is going to maybe resist it. And so what you need to do is take a look at organizational obstacles. Indeed, this kind of blocking is a critical role of any good leader, to focus on blocking any of the behaviors from other people and leading people through them. So you look at what are the constraints. If the organization not interested at all, how do you get them interested? If they're negatively interested, how do you turn that into either disinterest or positive interest? But you need to understand that many of the people, when they're running these things, will have poor project management. And poor project management is a real problem. And therefore, you need to be able to address that as well. You need to be able to get people to manage the project so they can move ahead quickly and efficiently and effectively. Valuations help us make great decisions, and so we can take it from there. And you need to manage time pressures. So if I give you extra time to work on it, I need to let you know you can use some of it at home and some of it in the office. I need to know that we still have deadlines, and deadlines might come before the new idea because we need to do it. The key thing that I have to avoid is an overemphasis on status quo. And so the only thing that's constant is change, many people have said, and that's the way to look at it. The status quo is how we're changing, the rate at which we're changing, the pace at which we're changing. What's important also is, beyond all of what I'm going to call the soft skill stuff we've been talking about, is that you need to be able to say what you really want from innovation concretely. It is a core value, and you should articulate it and define it. It isn't something that's outside of what we do. It is core to everyone's job description. And what you need to do is be able to have a way of measuring it in terms of its effort and energy and success. And that means looking at cultural and strategic performance standards that you can measure. And as many of you know, I work with Evaluate to Win, which is now called Execute to Win. You can look at our website, eval2win.com, learn about it. It's an accountability system that any company can use, which creates accountability, driving conversations between every supervisor and their employees on performing at the level that you're trying to accomplish. And then setting standards that you want to see done. And here's the key part, when they're not being met, rather than the gotchas, it's focused on the continuous improvement. What can we do to get you to where we want to go? So if you're selling at $100,000 a month and our goal is to get you to 120, what do we do to get you that extra 20? That's the focus, and that's what Eval to Win does very well, because it's focusing on the conversation. So if I were to put all this together for you, what does it really mean? It means essentially creativity and innovation is up to us. We have to take responsibility for it, because in our system, what we're saying is it's the leader whose role is critical. You are a role model. You represent the concept, and you want to represent the practice. You have to encourage risk-taking. You have to provide a supportive team. And to do that, you're building it. So what you're doing is hiring people who are creative, who respect innovation, making them part of the team, and then building the team to adopt that as one of its performance standards so that it feels good about what it's done. You also need to manage expectations. No, Rome was not built overnight or in a day. It's going to take a little longer. How long is it going to take is realistic. What you want to do is make sure that if someone does innovate something, they are rewarded, even if it fails. But you want to reward them so that they're encouraged to do it, because you want to hold on to them, because channeling that extra energy into your company is all the difference in the world. And if you follow this advice, you, the creator, you, the innovator, you, the leader, you, the CEO of a company with leaders and creative people, will be a hero. And that is what it's really all about. And here at the Presentation Excellence Group, that's really what we're focusing on every day, getting up in the morning early to be able to help you become very effective at what you do. For more information about innovation and creativity and how you can channel it into your company, you can contact me through Commanding Strategies or Jerry Kahn written out at Presentation Excellence Group. And with this, I'm going to now end today's webinar. I want to remind you that for those of you who are into the leadership question and are looking at the new leaders and asking how do we really spend time cultivating them to become effective leaders as we move forward, please attend next week's webinar, the last of the series. And you know how to register. Just go to betterwayworkshops.com and go to our webinar page. I will take any questions that come up right now. And the question here is, how do we channel it so that creative ideas really lead to innovations as opposed to take us on wild goose chases? That's a great question. It's about the dissenting issue. How do you standardize culture? Remember, if you've created a quality circle, or we call it a creative innovation circle, then what happens is ideas could be looked at there and vetted and discussed, and then the teams can pick the ones that they want to take and advocate the most and move it. In other words, just as it's a team that comes up with the idea, it's a team that can decide what are the best ones. Again, if you go to Right Solutions, that's how they've done it. What happens is they look at the top, I'm making it up now, 10 stock companies that have invented from the idea market, and they pick the ones that they think are most productive. It might be that it's not number 1, 2, and 3. It might be 1, 3, and 5. And so they're doing that. In other words, the goal is to trust the expertise of your own people to be able to make the right decisions. And with that, I think I want to just wish you a good week and an opportunity